for coming to today's event on Know Theater. My name is Christopher Ellars. I'm a 9th semester student here at EU. I am pursuing a dual degree in voice performance and Japanese language and literature. Last year I graduated from the CFA. This semester is my final semester, and I'm finishing my thesis on Japanese. I focus on the pre-modern Japanese performing arts, and specifically Know Theater, and how it influences the Western world of the performing arts. I went to Japan this summer to study Know acting traditions as a part of my thesis research, and I studied with the Kanze and Kongo traditions of Know Theater. Prior to this, I did a lot of, like over a year, of deep academic diving into Know Theater, the treatises, the dramaturgy, the ideology of Know Theater, and also trying my hand at translation and whatnot. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm really happy to share with you all. These are some pictures from the summer. The one on the left is from the first program where I studied with Kanze School actors, and then the second is a group photo from the second program, which was with Kongo School actors. So Know Theater is something that's very niche, but also very quintessential of traditional Japanese culture. So some of you might have heard of it before, some of you might not. I thought I would start with a clip of a very famous Know play called Lady Aoi, or Aoi Noe, which is based on the Aoi Noe chapter of The Tale of Genji, which is the world's oldest novel. Some of you might know it. And it's really famous and really popular right now because of, I don't know if you all know the Taiga drama, but every year NHK produces this big Japanese language historical drama, and this year it's based on the life of the author of The Tale of Genji. And there's a lot of Know plays like Lady Aoi, which are based on The Tale of Genji, and they're all being performed over and over again while the Taiga drama happens. Even some of the ones that are kind of rare and are never performed are being performed a lot right obviously very different from any other form of theater you're probably used to. So I thought I would start by giving a little bit of history and historical context to Know. So Know Theater is known as the world's oldest living theatrical tradition, which means that it has been performed consecutively for its entire existence, which is just about 700 years. when we trace the history of Noh theater, most historians agree that it originated in the 14th century based on historical records, but when you look at some documents it can be a little difficult. For example, if you look at the treatises, they talk about their tradition dating back all the way to the time of the historical Buddha in India, which would make it 2,000 years of history and tradition, and they believe that Noh was transmitted by these reincarnated spirits of these very important historical figures from the origins of Indian Buddhism. But again, based on the historical records, historians have figured out that Noh theater originated around the 14th century and is actually an amalgamation of a bunch of different pre-existing performing art forms that range from being incredibly sacred and performed by monks to very secular and performed on behalf of the imperial aristocracy. Noh theater was founded by a father-son duo named Kanami and Zeami, Kanami being the father and Zeami being the son. Kanami is the one that really initiated the creation of Noh, but it is Zeami that really popularized it and made it into what we know it as today. When Zeami was around 14, he gave a performance for the shogun, or big military warlord, right, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, and Yoshimitsu fell madly in love with Zeami and began treating him as if he was one of his own consorts, which caused a lot of scandal because no actors at the time were no better than street performers. But he's the shogun, so you can't really argue with him. And this allowed Noh theater to really blossom into the art form that we know it as today. This is also the first time that Noh theater received patronage from the military aristocracy, and it is the start of the very close relationship that the samurai had with Noh theater, which only ended with the abolishment of the feudal system. Noh theater really blossomed over the next 300 years. Thousands of plays were written from various different types and genres. And in the 17th century, there was a big reformation, which did cut down the repertory, but it also made Noh theater the official theater form of the state. No actors were granted the same status in the social hierarchy as the samurai, which was the highest caste right under the emperor and the shogun. And this also allowed the actors to wear swords, for example, in public, and a lot of other pleasures that they were granted. And this continued until the 19th century, when the West really starts coming into Japan after a 250-year period of relative peace and kind of xenophobic closure of the country. The Japanese were really impressed and startled by how knowledgeable the Western world was of their own arts. In the West, there's a very long academic and critical history of theatrical analysis and whatnot, and all of the major treatises and the plays and playwrights and everything are very well studied. But in Japan at the time, these traditions were secrets. Only the highest members of the Noh tradition were even allowed to possess the manuscripts of the treatises, and they only were allowed to orally transmit the knowledge to their own students and their own families. And so they were afraid of the West and Western culture really taking over, and so at this point they really focused on publishing all of these treatises and publishing all of these texts, translating them into the modern language, and then again translating them into Western languages to kind of show that their culture could hold up to the West. And this is why we can really study and enjoy Noh theater to the detailed extent that we can now. And that's basically a good historical arc. I want to talk a bit about performance. So, Noh theater, first and foremost, is about the exploration and analysis of human pathos. If you're familiar with Noh theater, that might be a little shocking because a lot of the main characters are from the supernatural realm, but I find that they end up really just being reflections of the human condition and very real human emotions. And a lot of them are spirits of deceased human beings, and they carry their desires and their suffering into the afterlife with them. And this is expounded upon over the course of a single play. There are two main styles of Noh theater, Mugen Noh and Genzai Noh. Genzai Noh is basically just contemporary Noh, and this means that all of the characters are living and human. Whereas Mugen no is fantasy no, and it usually means that the main character is from the supernatural realm, whether they're a ghost or a god or a demon or something of that nature. Over the course of the play, the main character's emotional state is explored and it usually develops. There's usually some kind of transition in the middle so that the emotion that you begin with is not the emotion that you end with. And this is especially the case in Mugen no, where the character, being supernatural, goes through a literal transformation, where the actor has to leave the stage and change costumes and mask, and then re-enter. In those plays, usually the main spiritual character is in disguise as a human, and then reveals the true nature of their identity by the end of the first half. And then in the second half, return in their true form, different mask, different costume, usually a lot more flamboyant, as you can see, like here, and relates the story of when they were alive or the story of their past or whatnot. The main character in No is known as the shite. Linguistically, this kind of relates to, or is connected to the term for colonel. It's basically the main character that the whole play is about. And then besides the shite, there's not really very many other characters in the No play. The main other character is the side character, known as the waki. The waki usually, but not always, enters the play first and kind of sets the stage. They explain who they are. They're usually some kind of traveling monk, and they explain where they are and what they're doing, and kind of creates the situation that then invites the shite to enter the stage. Then, after the shite enters, the waki becomes kind of the go-between for the shite and the audience, and through interacting with the shite, invites them to explain their own emotional state and their own situation for the audience's pleasure. Beyond that, there's really no other characters. There are accompanying characters sometimes, and they can range from being like one character to a whole host of characters. Sometimes they have more to do with the action than other times. Other times they're literally just bodies on the stage. And you can have tsure accompanying the main shite character, and they will sometimes also wear masks. Or you will have tsure who accompany the waki characters, and they never wear masks. They're not deemed important enough as characters. And also, they're usually of this realm, and when you wear a mask, it usually reflects that you are supernatural, or not quite connected to the mortal realm. Yeah, I basically explained all of that. Okay, so then there are 5 schools of No acting. These 5 schools are Kanze, Kongo, Komparu, Hosho, and Kita. So basically there are 5 different traditions, 4 of which originate with the origins of No and can trace their history back to the first No theater troupes in Kyoto. These are Kanze, Kongo, Komparu, and Hosho. The Kita school originated in the 17th century in what is now Tokyo, because when the Tokugawa government moved to Edo, which is now Tokyo, they wanted to create their own style of No that they could take ownership of, and that could set them as the military aristocracy apart from the rest of Japan. And so the Kita school was born. The video that you saw earlier was of a Kita school production. Yeah. Okay, so next I want to talk about No masks, arguably the coolest part of No theater. Historically, we have records of there being over 300 different kinds of masks, but now, after the Reformation and whatnot, they've kind of been dwindled down to a nice, neat 66. Unlike other forms of theater that use masks, such as commedia dell'arte, where the masks kind of represent stock characters like Arlecchino, Il Dottore, Colombina, these characters that always show up in every play. In No, they're not stock characters so much as they are character archetypes. So rather than a specific character that recurs in the tradition, it will be like the weeping mother, the beautiful maiden, the fierce demon, the mighty god, things like that. They're a little bit more specific than that, but you kind of get the idea. I have a No mask here that I'd like to show you. This is a wonderful example of a Noh mask. This mask is called Shakumi. Shakumi is a weeping mother character. She is a middle-aged woman who has suffered the loss of her child. She searches everywhere for the child. The child is missing. They've usually been kidnapped or they've wandered off or whatnot. Normally they're kidnapped. And so you can see the lines drawn in her face to represent this sorrow. I forgot to mention, there are 5 categories of Noh plays. The first category is God, and from there on it's warrior, woman, mad woman, and demon. They're organized in this fashion because in the 17th century, a single program of performances would last an entire day, and there would be multiple plays performed in succession. And you would start with the lower categories because they were the slower paced plays, and then you would progress until you get to the final category, which was the fastest paced. And this kind of character is in the 4th category because these weeping mothers usually are so grieved by their missing children that they go mad with their grief. And the play that I'm specifically researching for my thesis, The Sumida River, is about a mad woman who has lost her child. So Noh masks are constructed out of a single piece of wood. Usually this is hinoki or cypress wood. And it's said that the act of carving the mask out of the tree reveals the spirit of the tree. And so the masks really have their own spirits, and they really are acutely aware of the characters that they have to play. The mask is kind of constructed emotionally in 4 quadrants. So when you enter the Noh stage as a main character wearing a mask, you always enter from this side, because you enter on a rampway called the Hashigakari, which extends off this side of the stage to the backstage area. You enter, and then you enter the stage, and you do your performance. There's some kind of emotional transformation in the story, and then when you leave this way, showing this profile. So it's said that this profile bears a different emotion than this profile because of the emotional arc of the story. What's more, it's also said that the top half of the face and the bottom half of the face also are carved with different emotions in mind. And this is better in candlelight, but when you tilt the mask, you can expose these emotions. So this is said to look more hopeful, and then this is said to look more downcast. Right. On the Shakumi, it's a little difficult to tell, but there's some other masks where the emotional difference between the top half and the bottom half of the face is really clear. I have some other pictorial examples I'd like to show you. As I get back into my setup. So this is one of the 2 most famous kinds of masks. This is the ko-omote. The ko-omote is the youngest archetype character in the Noh tradition. The ko-omote is representative of a 12 or 13-year-old girl, which in the medieval era would be when a woman reaches adulthood. It's kind of crazy, but okay. And you can't really tell in this photo because of the shadows, but this mask is said, or you can tell that it's younger because the mask is said to show remaining baby fat on the face. So it's a little chubbier. There's a really beautiful example of the ko-omote mask in the Japanese art exhibit at the MFA that they just reopened. I hope it's still there. I hope they're not cycling through. It's a really beautiful mask. That's Edo period, I think. This is okina. Okina is the oldest mask in the Noh tradition. It's used for the Okina Sarugaku play, which is purely a ritual performance. And it's so old that half, if not the majority of the text is completely unintelligible to modern Japanese people. And this is the only mask, if you can see here, that, I'm breaking the thing. This is the only mask where the bottom jaw is actually separated from the top part of the face. So when the actor wears this mask, the mouth actually moves. And this is the face of a very specific god, and it's said that when the actor dons this mask, they are possessed by the spirit of the god, which is a great honor, but it's also said to take 10 years off the actor's life. So, it's a little, perform at your own risk. This is Chujo. Chujo is a mask that represents the spirits of fallen warriors. It's based on the face of the very famous early Japanese courtier Ariwara no Narihira, who was renowned for his beauty and just being the perfect courtier. His poetry is also of great renown. And the Chujo mask represents the spirit of a fallen warrior who has to fight endless battles in the Ashura realm of hell. And so it's quite common in the second category warrior plays, where on the anniversary of the warrior's death, their spirit appears again to, in one play, for example, they confront the man that killed them. In another play, they try to reconcile with their wife, who they left behind. I want to note, because it's important to me, that not all warrior plays are men plays. There's a very famous example called Tomoe, based on the life of Tomoe Gozen, who is one of the most famous female warriors of Japan, and also just one of the most famous warriors of Japan in general, known for her ferocity in battle. This is O Tobide, which is one of my personal favorites because I actually got to wear this mask when I was in Japan. And apparently it depicts a demon, but I've only ever seen it in plays where it's depicted a god. And I learned a dance where the actor is supposed to wear this mask and they're portraying a god. It is called O Tobide. So how many of us study Japanese by a raise of hands? Okay, so, yeah. So you can probably literally, it's very simple characters. You can probably literally translate the name. O Tobide, the great jumping out, refers to the fact that the eyes look like they're bulging or jumping out of the skull. There is also a Kotobide, which looks a little bit more like a normal man, and the eyes are quite large, but they're not as round and bulging as this. And I think you can see it in one of the books that's being passed around. This is Shikami. The name comes from the furrowing of the brow, and it's a very fierce demon. One of the plays that Shikami is used for is the play Shari, about a demon who steals the bones of Buddha because he wants to gain enlightenment, but he wants enlightenment all for himself and doesn't want to share it. And then there is the second of the two most famous Noh masks. Some of you probably recognize it, the Hanya. The Hanya represents the spirit, the enraged spirit, of a woman who has been wronged by a man. It is common in both demon category plays and madwoman category plays.
Oh, like Rokujo.
Like Rokujo, yes, exactly. This is the mask that Rokujo's spirit transforms into in the play Lady Aoi. And this is a very good example of what I was talking about earlier, where the top half and the bottom half of the mask bear different expressions. So, my arm's not big enough, but if you cover the top half and you focus just on the mouth, it's very ferocious. But then if you look at just the eyes, you can see a profound sorrow that I think makes this very tragically beautiful. I don't know. Some people think it's grotesque, but there's also a great, for any of you film buffs, there's a great horror film from 1966 called Onibaba that features the Hanya. And I won't tell you anything about it, you should just go watch it. Very good. So finally, I wanted to talk about some modern influences of Noh theater and traces that we can see in popular culture. I'm sure we've all seen this film. So I don't know if you guys knew this, I didn't for a long time, but the character of No Face in Spirited Away is called No Face because his face is supposed to be a no mask. I don't know, I don't think it's a specific mask. I think Miyazaki had his own artistic licensing when he created this mask, but it is said to be based on a no mask. And then this, for any of my Kurosawa fans in the room, this is a film by Akira Kurosawa called Throne of Blood. It is a Japanese version of the story Macbeth by Shakespeare. And there's a lot of Noh theater influences, and I found this really cool picture that shows 4 of the main characters and the masks that their faces are kind of based off of. So from top to bottom, this is Yase Otoko, who is the spirit of a suffering man who has passed away. Fukai, which is a younger version of Shakuni that I showed you. And also, the Fukai mask is supposed to depict a woman of more noble bearing than Shakuni, which is an older woman who comes from the countryside. Chujo, and then Yamamba, which is kind of a mad woman of the mountains. It's a really fun mask. Then there is some other really interesting examples of Noh in the modern world. How many of you have seen FX's Shogun by hand? Oh, you all should watch it. It's so good. I mean, if you can't handle gore, then like maybe no, but it's a really good series that is a very good historically accurate depiction of life in Japan in the 16th century. And in episode 6, they have a Noh play that they perform, which was specially commissioned for the production, and they commissioned the Iemoto, or the head of the Hosho school. And there's some videos on YouTube that you can look at with him like making it and demonstrating it, and it's really cool. But I want to focus on the top photo there. I wonder if any of you can recognize the face. I'll let you ponder. So this is a picture of a very new production.
He looks like Mishima.
Is that me?
He looks like Mishima.
Oh! Yeah, kind of. A for effort. It does kind of. This is from a very new production called Aotsuki no Memphis, or Blue Moon over Memphis. It is a Noh play in the fantasy style about the ghost of Elvis Presley, which is the wildest concept for a Noh play. I will.
So that's Elvis.
So that's Elvis. That's Elvis in the second half.
UQ Mishima.
I mean, from far away, you can. I mean, if you look at like the cowlick in the front, you can kind of see it. But
That's great.
this is the booklet that they were. I got to see this performance when it came to Kyoto. And this is the booklet, so I'll pass that around. It was the most wild concept of a Noh play that I have ever heard of, and going into it, I was really excited, but also I could not take it seriously. And then once I gave into the conventions of the Noh, it was one of the most compelling pieces of theater that I've seen. And I wanted to show a short video of them talking about it, because I think it's really interesting.
My name is John Ogilvie, and I am Elvis Presley. Blue Moon over Memphis is an English language Noh about Elvis Presley.
北流能楽師の大島絹江です。言語が違ってもやっぱり脳として成立していれば将来性があるんじゃないかな。
From a Western perspective, it's avant-garde. My name is Richard Emmert, and I'm the composer of Blue Moon over Memphis and the director of the play. Noh is Japan's 650-year-old classical stage art. The story is of a woman, a fan of Elvis from Cleveland, Ohio, who travels to Memphis on the anniversary of his death.
エルビスがお能になるっていうのは日本人のイメージの中ではなかったことなので、とてもこう私から見るとユニークな発想っていうふうに思ったんですけども。
Doing this as a Noh reveals Elvis in a completely different way.
And we are visiting a very American topic with a very Japanese form. Those two things on top of each other make for very exciting performance.
The mask maker is a Japanese Noh mask maker, Kitazawa Hideta.
You know, with the mask on, I can see the audience, but they can't see me. And because the movement we have is so slow, it's really amazing to see people's reactions, because I can feel them having a connection with an inanimate object. Now we are breaking through and making something new, using the melodies of Elvis's songs.
Anjay melody is a standard that we have done in Know style.
You hear the music and you know it, but you don't know exactly what it is. Know is about themes. Know is about finding ways to express emotions through movement and sound. It's able to take tragedy and discuss it in a very, very palpable way if you give into it.
So, I just want to highlight something that John said at the end. I can call him John, I met him. He's really nice. Something that he said at the end of how Know makes for really compelling theater if you give into it. And I think that's one of the really important things when you experience Know theater, especially for the first time, and especially as a Westerner. It's so completely different than anything that we experience. But it really is truly beautiful if you give into the structure of it and the form of it. Yeah, that's pretty much it for my presentation. I wanted to kind of open the floor now for if anyone has any questions about Know, about the process of learning when I was in Japan, about anything. I'm happy to take any questions. Yes?
So on the first slide that you were showing the Know mask, there was one that only had like the lower half of the face.
Yeah! So, the second program that I did was with the Kongo School. It was with the International Know Institute, which was founded by a wonderful actor who unfortunately is no longer with us, Udaka Michishige. It is continued by his children, his two sons, Tatsushige and Norishige, and his daughter, Keiko. Something unique about Michishige is that he was not only an actor, but a mask carver. And this tradition is carried on by his children. Tatsushige and Norishige are actors, and Keiko is a mask carver. And all of these masks that you see are carved by either Michishige or Keiko. And that half one was a project that Keiko took on during the pandemic. She had this kind of challenge with her friends where they were trying to make new, fun, compelling pieces of art during the pandemic while they were all at home, and she decided to make a mask of the Know Komote face. So she is really trying to push the bar and do new and creative things with Know masks. It's a little difficult because Know is so focused, the tradition now is so focused on preservation that sometimes there's a lot of pushback. But she's been doing some really interesting things. She also, I forget the name of the game, but there's a game that apparently is very popular, and it uses a new design of the Hanya mask, and the CEO actually commissioned Keiko to carve a mask that they then kind of digitally scanned and then put into the game, and now the mask is like hanging on the CEO's wall or something like that. But yeah, so she's really trying to push the envelope, and that's one of her projects that she did. Yes?
I heard from Professor Vincent that like a lot of ordinary Japanese people, they practice Know at their house for like mindfulness, one of their practice, but they don't seek to perform it in public. Like, how is that?
Yeah, so Know has very deep, strong roots with Buddhism, and particularly with Zen. Both Know theater and Zen kind of originated around the same time. And both were practiced by the samurai class. And so Noh theater, a lot of people focus on the practice of it as almost like yoga. It's like a mindfulness, being in the present moment, and being aware of time and space around you, and focus. And because Noh is based on these kata, which are these forms, and they're very rigid, so there's not a whole lot of creativity that you can do with them. And so by giving into that and really just like devoting yourself to the practice of it and going through the motions, it kind of helps you be in the present moment. There's also a lot of old people that take on Noh as a form of exercise because it's not super rigorous, but you need a lot of stamina when you perform. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question. Yes?
I was going to ask about the vocals. It's all done by people sitting down, like a chorus?
Yes.
Is that right? So nobody, the 1, 2, or 3 actors, they don't speak, they sometimes make noises, right?
Yes,
Or...
so in the Noh play, the main characters do a combination of recitation and chant.
Okay.
The chorus does a lot of the chanting on the side. Often, the chorus is very interesting because it's somewhat similar to the chorus in like Greek drama,
Yeah.
but unlike the Greek drama where the emphasis is on like commenting on the action, the Noh chorus called the Jiutai actually will provide narration, and they'll also take on the voice of some of the
I
characters.
think that was in the first video.
Yeah.
Right? The dialogue was coming from the guy sitting down. Right?
From the guy sitting down, but it was in the voice of the main character. Exactly. And so, for translation purposes, it can make translating the Jiutai parts really difficult because you don't know from what perspective that they're speaking from, and the classical language that's used is so vague to begin with, it's so difficult to understand what perspective they're coming from. So you have to really sit with it and look at the context when you're translating. But yeah, and there are 2 different styles of chant. Suyogin, which is strong chant, which is very kind of monotonous. It focuses on, I mean, pitch in a Western sense is very different than pitch in the Noh sense, but you focus on like basically the same pitch area, and you just kind of fluctuate around there with minimal ornamentation. And then there's Yoagin, which is weak chant, which just means that there's more melodic structure, and you kind of change notes around it, and there's more of like higher peaks and lower peaks and whatnot when you chant. And the strong chants are reserved for characters like gods or more stronger characters, and the Yoagin is used for more feminine characters or softer characters.
So you said for a lot of the warrior ones, they're coming back and like talking to somebody.
Yes.
So would that be like the side character, like because it's only one person on stage most of the time, right?
Yeah.
So how is it like being presented, like with who they're talking to?
Yeah. So very good question. It is the side character. We call them the waki, right? So I will give you an example. There's a very famous play called Atsumori, which is from an episode in the Heike Monogatari, or the Tale of the Heike, for those of you who don't speak Japanese. And it is about, so in the story in the Tale of the Heike, Atsumori is a 16-year-old young man, and he's very much an aristocrat, but he's forced to go fight in battle, and he is confronted by this big warrior who's fighting for the Genji clan, and he is overtaken by the Genji warrior, and the Genji warrior goes to kill him, but beforehand reveals Atsumori's face and sees that he's so young that he's deeply moved and saddened by the situation and doesn't want to kill Atsumori, but he then sees his fellow soldiers of the Genji coming over, and he knows that if he doesn't kill them, they will. So he thinks it's better for him to kill Atsumori and then become a monk and like pray for his soul and whatnot. And so in the Noh play Atsumori, it takes place on the 1-year anniversary of Atsumori's death. And the soldier that killed him, who has now become a monk, is the waki side character. and he visits the place to pay his respects, and the ghost of Atsumori visits him, and they have a conversation. And it's interesting because you would think that Atsumori would hate him because he's the murderer, but in reality they have a very thoughtful conversation, and they both really respect each other, and Atsumori especially because Kumagai, the man who killed him, feels so remorseful and then completely gives up everything and becomes a monk and whatnot. And so Atsumori also has deep respect for Kumagai, even though Kumagai killed him. But that's an example of like a warrior play where there's that. There's also a play called Kiyotsune, where the Waki side character is Kiyotsune's wife. And it's the anniversary of Kiyotsune's death, and she is really mad because she's been left behind, and she had been promised by her husband that he wouldn't do that. But then he went and died, and so she's really mad, and then he visits her to try and console her, but it doesn't really work. So that's another example. And then various examples like that, but that's kind of how it would work.
So the Waki is like sitting off to the side? From what
Yeah,
it
they
looks
literally,
like?
so you can kind of see it in the video. Here. Oh, you know what? Let's do this. So, this is a very different kind of play with different characters, but this is kind of where the Waki character would be sitting, watching the spirit of whoever they're connected to. Either in Atsumori, it would be the monk, and then the spirit of Atsumori, right, would be dancing in the center of the stage. And, yeah. This is kind of...
How does the dialogue then work?
The dialogue...
Who's speaking it?
It's usually the shite character, but the jiutai voices them. So the shite character will come in every once in a while, but the emphasis for them is on movement, and the jiutai kind of takes over the telling of the story.
The chorus.
The chorus. Sorry, yes, the chorus. The chorus.
Yeah.
These people. Yeah.
So they would voice both characters?
They would voice the main character. The side character just kind of sits there and takes it in.
But then it's not a dialogue.
It's not really dialogue from like a conversation perspective. It's weird. So when the side character sits down, the focus is on the main character, and they're relating their story. But prior to that, the side character is actually standing in that general vicinity, and they do have a conversation, and it usually turns into they're saying different things, and then it morphs into they start basically interrupting each other and saying the same sentence. And then from there, the side character sits down, and the main character takes over and...
So,
sorry.
If both be channeled, if the chorus is speaking for both of them, how do they interrupt each other?
Oh, yes, okay. I am not explaining this well. So, prior to the chorus overtaking the characters, it's the shite and the waki, the main and the side character, speaking for themselves. So it's just them, and they have a conversation, and then it transforms into them saying the same sentences but split between the two characters. Then the waki will stop and sit down, and the shite will start to dance, and it's at that point that the chorus comes in and starts speaking on behalf of the main character. One of the reasons why it's really complicated to translate these plays. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Watching some of these videos, I noticed a very similar kind of body language to something like E-idol, and you were talking about kata. Do you know if there's any kind of historical or cultural connection between the practices or kind of martial arts in general?
I would say yes, because they come out of warrior culture and like the greater Bushido, and the no training was a very important part of a samurai's upbringing. They all had to learn the no plays. It was seen as the practice of no was something that created discipline, and then also engaging with the no text allowed them to engage with their cultural history and No is also really big among the samurai because the samurai were constantly trying to make themselves seem as sophisticated as the imperial aristocracy, and so they kind of took ownership of the No because so many No plays have deep intertextuality with the Japanese classics that all the imperial aristocrats were like cultivated in from a very young age. So the No is a very big part of their practice, but also all of the other like Iedo, Aikido, these were also kind of, or like earlier forms were also a part of their training. I'm not an expert on the martial arts, so I can't talk too much about it, but they share the same cultural root in like Bushido warrior culture. So there is a certain amount of similarity.
So, with the chorus, is it mainly percussion that they're using for instruments that are like being played along? Because I noticed in the previous, it was mainly like the voice percussion and then the actors stomping.
Yes. So let me see if I can. Oh, stepping on all the books. Yeah. Okay. So that's more or less. You kind of see all of them. Okay. So the instrumental the orchestra of the No play, right, is called the Hayashi, which is more or less the ensemble, right? And there are 4. In this scene, only 2 of them are playing, but you have one right here, and then this guy, and then this guy, and then this person doesn't play until the second half, but he's sitting there waiting. So this guy and over all play different drums. This is the kotsuzumi, which is like literally the small drum, but like the shoulder drum. You can't see it because the actor is here, but this person plays the otsuzumi, which is like the big drum, but it's often translated as like the hip drum or like the side drum because they play it on this hip. They're sitting down and they have it on this hip and they kind of smack it really loudly. And then this is just taiko. This person plays the nokan, which is a specific kind of flute for the No theater. The emphasis is on percussion and rhythm. The nokan is the only instrument that plays pitches in any remote sense like we would call them pitches, but that is not actually the emphasis, and the melodic content is not the emphasis. It's actually the rhythm of the flute line that's more important. And then these 3 drummers not just, or they don't just drum, they also have like kakegoe, these emphatic shouts that they do. And all of this provides timing communication and timing information for the chorus and the actors. And so they kind of are the glue that holds everything together. And sometimes they don't exactly match up, but when that happens, it's because the Hayashi ensemble is signaling that there is a transition about to happen. And so they'll start playing in like a different tempo, for example. And for a Westerner, it can be very jarring to hear like the chorus singing at one speed and then the instruments start playing at another speed, and you're like, what's right? And if they're both right, it's just they're going to transition now. Yeah, thank you for asking that. The No music is really, really fascinating. Because also, like, I say pitch isn't really important. The 2 drums, actually the 3 drums, are all pitched instruments, technically. And this is kind of like, if you've heard of a talking drum, where it has strings and you squeeze them and the pitch of the drum head changes. This is technically a kind of talking drum, where some of the hits you actually squeeze the strings to change the timbre. But again, it's a lot more vague than from like a Western perspective. So like one of my No sensei said that like for people with perfect pitch, you know, I apologize, you know, because it's really jarring, you know. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
I suppose one more kind of about the chorus and the instrumentalists, are they kind of training specifically to be part of the chorus or the instruments, or are they training to be that main actor one day?
Really good question. So, all of the actors and the chorus train to be main character actors. They're all what is known as the shite actors, right? Except for the waki. The waki has their own school. There's only one waki school, and they only do these side roles. I don't know why, but yeah, a lot of them actually end up becoming like teachers of chant, and so there are like shite actors. I mean, most shite actors come from families of Noh, and so they study with their parents, but other professional actors, and even like amateurs who want to study, will study Noh chant with waki characters because they have to do a lot of it. And the style of chant is not necessarily different. All of the actors and the chorus also train in the instruments. So, and they train for several years. Like, one of my teachers, Tatsuchige Sensei, was saying that he trained on, I think it was Nokan, for 6 years. And actually, I think it was all of them. He trained on all of them for 6 years. Because you're supposed to be proficient in them so that you can understand how they work. And there's sometimes, I mean, Noh doesn't really have rehearsals, but when they do, you need to be able to step in case something goes wrong and start playing one of the instruments. The only people who don't, like, the instrumentalists themselves do not train to be actors. They're just instrumentalists, but the actors have to have an intimate knowledge of what the instruments do in order to do their craft. So they are expected to learn the instruments. It's kind of like unfair. They're expected to learn the instruments, but the instruments don't have to learn acting. But the instruments have to know the chants really well because of how they communicate. And a lot of, actually, this is a book of sheet music for the kotsuzumi. And when you look in it, the red and black notation that I'll bring it up to you, but the red and black notations, which are like dots and circles and whatnot, are the musical notations for the instrument. But then you'll also see that the lines of the chorus and the main character are also written in here. So I will pass this around and take a look at that. So yeah, they have to know the chants, but that's it. They don't have to learn the acting or anything.
How is Noh supported in Japan now? Do they make their money off ticket prices, or government funding, or some sponsors? Or?
Very good question. So, that is a scary topic for some people.
Sure.
Noh theater is still to this day known as like the national theater form of Japan, and so there's a lot of government things in place to like protect it, but in terms of like the funding, most Noh actors cannot live off of performances and ticket prices alone. Most of them also teach. This is one of the reasons why there's a really big amateur group or community of practitioners in Japan, because they can take from these Noh masters because they have to teach in order to survive. And when Noh masters become teachers, they do not, I mean, most professional Noh actors come from a family of Noh actors, and so they learn from their parents, but in that situation, obviously, you don't have to pay your dad for lessons, right? So they don't get money from that, but they do get money from people outside of the family, and most of the people outside of the family are amateurs. Although it is possible to come from outside and become a professional. They're very open to that. It's just a lot harder, and most people don't have the time. So all of the Noh performances, they don't have directors. The main person who organizes it is the main character, and they have to finance everything. And so it becomes really expensive. And so that's one of the reasons why they have to teach lessons as well as try and get ticket prices. And they'll also for example, in the second program I did, those masters were really active and would travel around Japan giving lessons and giving workshops and whatnot, and we're trying to look into going outside of Japan and like coming to the West and give workshops and whatnot. So it's partially out of love for the art form, and it's partially out of a necessity to survive, right? There is a book coming out that Professor Diego Pellecchia of Kyoto Sangyo University is helping write/edit. He's not a professional Noh actor, but he's a certified Noh teacher and studies with the Udaka family, so I interacted with him a lot over the summer, and he was saying it's the first book that is going to actually, like, in detail cover the logistical process of, like, what do Noh actors do to survive, and how do they put on the play, and how do they finance it, and things like that, because that's not really talked about, partially because they don't want to talk about it. So, yeah. We have time for a couple more questions. Anything else?
What drew you to Noh theater?
Ah, good question. I don't know, quite frankly. I kind of fell into it. So I've always been in love with the performing arts. I come from a family of performing, I mean obviously Western performing artists, but performing artists nonetheless. And so the Japanese performing arts have always had a very big, or there's always been a very big appeal to them for me. Originally it was kabuki. I still love kabuki theater so much, and I want to study it more. However, so the real story is, I was trying to come up with a thesis project, and I wanted to combine my two majors, so opera and Japanese. And there are a handful of operas that are based on Japanese plays, and I had two in mind. One was based on a kabuki play, and one was the one I'm currently researching, which is based on a Noh play. And long story short, logistically it made more sense to focus on the Noh, because Noh, as you can see, is a minimalist art form, whereas kabuki, there's all the makeup and the sets and the costume design and the props and everything, and it's just way bigger. So I focused on the Noh, and by forcing myself to study it, I started really, obviously, learning more about the dramaturgy and getting more into the world, and realizing just how profound it is as an art form, and the complexity of it, both textually and also now over the summer, learning about all the deep layers of performance as well that go into it. Yeah, the more I do it, the more I just like really get into it. Thank you for that question.
So how long will a Noh mask be used for?
That's a really good question. Hundreds of years. There are Noh masks that are used now which date back to the origins of Noh theater. It's very scary when those actors, like the actors are very nervous when they use those masks, but there is this very, I think, wonderful philosophy that they have, which is like these masks, yes, they're beautiful pieces of art and they need to be protected, but they were made to be used. And the masks themselves have spirits, and you have to interact with the spirits, right? So, and pay respects to them, and you pay respect by using them and letting them perform. And so, a lot of the masks that are used are very old. There are also, obviously, new masks, like the ones that I showed you in that collage and whatnot. Most of them were very new. Those masks, when they're usually made based on a specific old mask, and they are made to look old. So the mask carvers will add deliberate imperfections based on the imperfections of the older masks. And there's this big like kerfuffle with mask makers, I'll say, because a lot of them want to make new things, but there's so much pressure to not just make the old designs, but literally make them look exactly like the old examples. But yeah, some of them are used for a very long time. So.
I was going to ask something actually back to the opera question, which is, I mean, maybe this is a big question, but how is your understanding of Britain's Curly River changed by studying Noh yourself personally, like, or the process of modeling his opera on Noh? Or, does it seem more superficial to you as an understanding of Noh, or creative as an adaptation, or what?
I think it's incredibly interesting as an adaptation. And I think also they were able to do things that are similar, or there's like connections in their earlier career as well that are so similar to Know that I don't think they were aware. And they weren't actually going for. But I see these similar, a lot of the main characters of Britain's operas are these confused, misunderstood, mad people, right? And they bear so much similarity to the mad women of the fourth category plays. Like, actually, I was just telling Professor Vincent, there's an aria in the very first opera that Benjamin Britten wrote called Peter Grimes, about a sailor who everyone is afraid of because they think he's a murderer, and he's like, not really, and he's trying to prove his innocence, but every time he tries to prove his innocence, something goes wrong, and people get a bad image of him. Like there's there's a scene where he enters a bar late at night, and it's a stormy night. He like bursts open the door, so everyone's like, oh, you know, and he tries to communicate with people, but he's been out at sea, and he's like, he has a very specific way of communicating that's rather weirdly, oddly poetic, and so people don't really understand him, and then he ends up getting into a bar fight, and then that makes people hate him even more. And that aria that he sings when he enters the stage, in that scene, really strongly resembles some of what the mad woman says in Sumida River in translation, which is so weird because that was before Britain went to Japan, right? Yeah, and it's literally like, it's like literally poetic images that are shared, like so specifically.
Wow.
That's just like bizarre.
He was made for it.
I think so. Yeah.
That's great.
It's a really good question. I'm gonna keep thinking about that.
Do we get to see you?
Yeah. So I have two more things planned for the rest of our time. One is demonstration, and the other is workshop. So there's no real order to this. I can either demonstrate and then you guys can try, or you guys can try and then I can demonstrate.
Why don't you demonstrate first?
I'll demonstrate first. Let me do that. So, nice executive decision. Okay, so, sorry, I'm doing this for a reason. La 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 la. Woo! So, this is the Know stage. So, this is the Know stage specifically at the Kongo no Gakudo, so the official Kongo Know Theater of Kyoto. And I want to talk about the construction of the stage a little bit so that you can see how this works out. This is very narrow compared to the Know stage. It should be going out a lot more. But, so you have this ramp, which is a hashigakari. It extends to the backstage area, and this is where important characters and the instrumentalists enter from. This is the stage at large. This apron off to the side is where the chorus sits. You can't really see it well, but there's a little sliding door here called the kirido, which is very small, and you have to duck when you go through it. Otherwise you hit your head, which I've done a couple times. And this is where the chorus enters, and it's also where the koken, or the stage attendants, enter. And also, so what I did is I learned shimai, which are dances as extracted from plays, which is this, it's kind of like arias as extracted from operas, or monologues as extracted from plays. And for shimai, in a recital, everybody enters from the side door because the hashigakari is very special and very significant. Yes?
So you mentioned how like artisans are making no masks, are making them to look exactly like the old ones.
Yes.
Does that like apply to the stage too? Like is trying to imitate?
Not to the same extent, but yes. For example, this back panel in the Kongo Know Theater, I think dates back to the Edo period, so it's at least 200-300 years old. And then you'll kind of see this white stuff. This is kind of gravel, basically, and it is supposed to pay homage to the fact that most Noh theaters were outside in gravel courtyards. And the aristocrats would sit in like the outer buildings, and then all the peasants would have to stand or sit on the gravel. But to this day, most official Noh theaters are inside, but they still have gravel to represent this. Other than that, I mean, the structure of the Noh stage, and even the fact that it's inside but there's still a roof and whatnot, remains the same, but they're not necessarily based on specific Noh theaters. The only thing that they'll try to do is they'll try to salvage parts of Noh theaters, like this back panel comes from an older stage that they had to then move, and whatnot. Yeah. The stage itself is organized into 9 quadrants, which is not super necessary for you to know for my demonstration purposes, but there are these 4 pillars, which are like goalposts for Noh actors. When you're wearing a mask like this, you can see the eye holes are really tiny. So when you're wearing the mask, it looks like you're looking through a keyhole. So there's not a whole lot of space that you can see. And so these giant pillars are really necessary so that the actor doesn't fall off the stage. Because this doesn't look very tall, but it's tall. It goes up to like the hip. Yeah, so yeah. I will demonstrate a Congo dance first. This is the Noh fan. It's called the ogi. And the ogi is very large. It's different than like, most people when they think of Japanese dance fans, they think of like kabuki fans or fans that geisha use. This is that kind of fan. And when you hold them next to each other, you can see that there's a very big difference. Also, when you open them, this is not the proper way to open a fan. They're very different. The paper is smaller. These fans are bound by string. This fan is bound by glue, which makes this fan sturdier because you're supposed to be able to toss this one around, because kabuki dances are a lot more fun, for lack of a better word. Not that Noh dances aren't fun, but they're not as spectacular. They're more refined. Yeah. And then you hold the fan in his hand. So I will demonstrate oimatsu, which is the old pine. It's kind of the dance that all Noh actors learn when they start out. And it is a dance where the main character is the spirit of an old pine tree that belonged to Sugawara no Michizane, who was a very famous early poet and courtier, who was banished from the capital to Kyushu, and it said that he really missed his plum tree and his pine tree, and the spirits of those trees felt his longing so clearly that they flew to him. And so this is a dance about that. Normally, there would be 3 to 5 people sitting here chanting while I dance, but we don't have the money to fly them over here, so I'm just going to chant myself. Okay.
Yowai wo sazukuru kono kimi no Yowai wo sazukuru kono kimi no yukusui mamore to waga shintaku no tsuge wo shirasuru
待つ風も雨も久しき春こそめでたけれ。So that is basically the standard dance that everybody learns. Yeah?
So, since you're like the spirit of the tree there, what mask do you wear, if you do wear it?
That's a good question. I don't actually know. I should know that. I studied that dance. I did not perform it. So I moved on to another dance. But let's look it up. Morimatsu no mask. Look at that. I think it's an old man mask. Look at that. So there are several different kinds of old man masks and just old people masks in Noh theater. And so this is one of them. There you go. There's the answer. Yeah, okay, we don't need to look at that. Yeah. So that's one. I can demonstrate another. Another dance that I learned is a Kanze school dance, or Kanze, it's in the Kanze school tradition, from a play called Kuzu, which is really complicated, but basically I am another god, and I am dancing to the emperor who has just been saved from an assassination attempt. And this, I will not be chanting because I don't have the whole thing memorized, but I have a recording of master actors, so they're going to do it for me. One interesting difference about Kanze school and Kongo school is that Kongo school, there's a lot more pomp and circumstance with entering and exiting the stage. And Kanze school, they're just a lot more, okay, let's get this done. So, like, we didn't really have, I mean, they generally talked about how you enter and exit the stage in the Kanze school program. But in Kongo school, like, we practice it, and like you have to come out, you have to sit down, you have to make sure the right knee is up and the left knee is down, and then you have to tilt when you open your fan, and then you have to do the whole thing, and then when you're done, you have to go backwards, but then you can't just stand up, you have to pivot on your knees, then you stand up. It was a whole thing. This is a guess, but I think it's because the Kongo school is traditionally the school of Know that was performed for the emperor. So it makes a little bit more sense from that there'd be more pomp and circumstance. Also, Kanze school makes up like 70% of the Know world, so I think sometimes it's like, okay, we don't have time, let's just do it, you know. Yeah, would anyone like to try? Are we shy? I can just do another dance. I think the general consensus is I should do another dance. So I'm going to do another dance.
I have another question.
Oh, yes!
So would your average Japanese speaker be able to follow exactly what is being said?
Well, we have Japanese speakers. Can you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand, but it's probably a little difficult, right?
Takes effort or education.
Yeah.
For the first time, especially, I knew the story, so I can follow it. But otherwise,
Is it like Shakespeare, sort of? Like you gotta.
A little bit, yeah. Some of the Know plays are like they're so famous that they're kind of like you need to know them, you know. And Zeami is considered one of the two biggest playwrights in Japan, the other one being Chikamatsu Monzaemon, who wrote for the kabuki and the puppet theater. And then the third one I would say, I should mention, is Kannami, who is Zeami's father, and also wrote some very beautiful plays. Know is written in classical Japanese, so there is a lot of difference, but specifically with Know, there's also weird, unique ways that they pronounce certain words. For example, in the first thing I did, I mentioned the plum tree. Plum would be ume, but in the chant you go ume. And there's differences like that. There's also, I said the word yukusue, but in Know, the pronunciation would be yukusuye. And there's certain pronunciation things that are a little bit different. And then also the general like chant style can make it difficult to understand sometimes.
I just wonder, I mean, you had the experience of translating it and reading it and thinking about it in so many different ways, but when you get up there and you are chanting it yourself, and there's a lot of emotion attached to these stories, right? And yet, the way of chanting, it doesn't map onto directly the way that, let's say, you, Chris, or me, you might express your emotions, right? I mean, it's sort of, it's a little bit artificial, stilted, stylized, right? Do you find that in performing it, that you come to a place where you're feeling those emotions, or are you just thinking more technique? Yeah, is it more like a technical exercise that you're doing? And that's what I'm very curious about that. What it's like to actually sing it.
Well, I have two answers. In Shimai, it's totally technique. I do not think of anything else. However, in the first program, one of the things that we had to do was we had to do a group chant with one of our teachers dancing. And this was from the play Yoro. And it's a really wonderful chant talking about, I mean, it's praise to the emperor, but it's also like, literally it starts with the emperor is a boat and the people are the sea. And it's like this symbiotic relationship. And we like nankai kurikaisu practiced that son of a gun so many times. And I actually started getting to this place of like, I don't know, enlightened detachment, shall I say. It started making a lot more sense that like, this really is almost a meditative practice, and you can really like chant your way into nirvana, kind of. And I don't think I got to nirvana, but I started to experience at least from the chant perspective, as to why people like doing this so much, which was weird. I have never done that before. Even with because I've done, I just graduated from the CFA as a voice major. I had to learn Gregorian chant. But Gregorian chant is a very different thing because there's a lot more melodic structure and, different techniques to reach the same goal, I think. But it's very easy to approach Gregorian chant as music versus no chant as anything but chant. At least from a Western perspective. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
Was it hard to master the vocal style coming from the West?
So hard. So damn hard, sorry. It was because what I learned is that in the West, opera singing pedagogy has advanced so much that we have to have an anatomical understanding of the voice and how it works in order to produce sound. But no pedagogy has not advanced beyond copy me. So when I would go and ask the Know masters, what are you doing? They would have some really interesting things to say about the breath that were similar to opera, but other than that, they were like, you just do it. I'm like, it's not helpful. And then one of the teachers, Diego, is Italian and is a Westerner, so I was like, okay, he had to learn. But he doesn't come from an artistic background. Prior to Know, he didn't do anything artistic. Know was his first big thing. So he also doesn't know. So you just can't ask him. And I swear to God, one of these days, I'm gonna get my PhD in vocal pedagogy. I'm gonna write a book.
I was just gonna say, put that in your proposal.
I literally asked, also, we had I asked so many people, but I asked one woman who was not a Know actor, but she was a Kotsuzumi teacher, and they also have to do similar things with their voice. And I was like, what are you doing? And her literal response was, どうやってするかな? Oh, how do you do that? I don't know. I was like, that's a good question. I'm like, that's not an answer, but okay.
But you're also, in other words, you're, it could sound like you're slightly out of tune, right? You're not staying in certain pitches very carefully where you would using a Western song, right?
In Suyogin strong chant, the point actually is you start on a pitch, which is usually arbitrary. It's usually set by the main actor. And then, over the course of the chant, the pitch actually raises ever so slightly, and then you have to reset and go until you go. The only time you go down is at the end of the chant. So you heard in the first chant, what did I do? Hisashiki haru koso medeta kere. The ending is the only part that you actually go low and return to the pitch. But the rest of it, you kind of steadily climb and then reset, and then steadily climb and then reset.
And where you start is up to you at the moment.
Well, it's up to the main actor.
Right.
It's not up to you. It's up to the main actor. But yeah, it's kind of just arbitrary. You have to pick a pitch, and then there is, I don't want to call it a scale, but there is a sense of upper, lower, middle pitch, and a kind of graphed out system that Know actors use. But it's very arbitrary. As soon as you pick one, you have to map out the rest. But in terms of the picking, it's really arbitrary. And yeah, so that's why some Know actors will say if you have perfect pitch, I'm so sorry for you, because it's a very jarring experience. Yeah, and also, at least for Tsuyogin, the notation system for Know is very weird, but for Tsuyogin, it's pretty much once you learn how it works, it makes sense. I then tried learning the weak chant, which is more melodic, and all of that just went out the window. And it was completely different. And to this day, I have no idea how they do melodic chant. And when I try to do it, it just sounds like I'm trying to sing opera badly. So, yeah, I don't know. I will say, in terms of acquiring the voice, we were allowed to wear a mask in practice performance once. And that experience, I think, now scientists will say, it's because you have a mask on and you're getting sound back to your face. But I felt like the God was speaking to me, and because I swear to God, that was the first time that I actually sounded like a Know actor. And I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And then I took the mask off and did it again. I was crap. Like, it was so bad. So I will say the mask also really helps. Yeah.
So, since this was performed outside, does costuming change with seasons, or because it's being normally on the anniversary of something, is it?
Yes, because the seasonal aesthetics are really important, just in Japanese culture, and in classical Japanese culture especially. It is not so much that when certain plays are, okay, this is a little bit of a stretch, I'm not, some of this is filling in the blanks, but it's not so much that the actors will change costume depending on the time of the year that the play is performed, but certain plays take place in certain seasons, and their costumes reflect that. Also, they will have parts of their costumes and props that reflect the type of character they are. So like, for example, mad women usually carry a seasonal sprig of something. Often it's bamboo, but it's not always bamboo. It's a seasonal sprig of something, which, for whatever reason, represents that they're mad. So like, for example, in my play, Sumida River, it takes place, in my play, I'm taking ownership. It takes place in the early spring, and the mad woman carries a sprig of bamboo. In other plays, it might be cherry blossoms. But it's less the time of year that the play is performed and more the time of year that the play is set. But yes, there is definitely seasonal differences, because that's just really important. Thank you for asking. That's a really good question. Any other questions? Yes.
If I recall, Know is historically kind of all-male actor sport, or performance. But there's so many like Madwoman, courtier characters. Like, is there more gender diversity in the modern era, or is there a kind of more traditional component?
So that's a fabulous question, and I can talk about it for a long time. But yes, so Know has this connotation of or this stereotype of being all male. If we look at the history, technically the only time that women were literally banned from performance was Edo period, and if I recall, it's because of the kabuki, because the kabuki was founded by women, and then they were so promiscuous that the government was like, no women on the stage, not allowed. So that was really the only time that women were completely legally prohibited. There is feminine influence in Know, and the influence of women actors in Know throughout history, but again, it is very stereotypically male. To this day, it is still dominated by male performers. However, Know, out of all of the classical arts, has the largest amount of professional women performers. And for example, the Uzawas are two of the most famous Know performers of main character roles to this day, and they're a mother-daughter duo. And they're of the Kanzei school. I just missed a performance. I left before they were coming to Kyoto for a performance of a play. But yeah, so there are more and more women. I also read, there was a Japan Times article about a performance of one of these Mad Women plays that was done entirely by women in Tokyo. So the number of professional women is increasing, which I say thank God, but it's still very male-dominated. But I think that will change over time, just with the necessity of the art form needs to survive, and if you're going to exclude so many people, it's not going to survive. Also, Know itself as an art form is very accommodating, and because it's really not about the actor, it's the actor basically is supposed to become a hollow vessel for the characters to embody, and so, you don't have to, like, in the West, with like method acting, there is this belief that you should have a direct connection, either through experience or physical body traits, with the character. But in Know, that's completely against the point. You're supposed to hide yourself so that you almost become a puppet for the character to control. And in this way, it's a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a lot more accommodating for all people, and it's a lot more inclusive from a theoretical perspective. And then when you get into actual practice, there's still a lot of people who are like, no, Know should only be performed by men. And there's also a lot of like audience members and practitioners who are like, no, it should only be men. And there's some women in Japan who will say, no, it should only be men. But I think the attitude is generally changing, which is a good thing. Also, some of the most beautiful Know voices that I've ever heard are women's voices. It's a very different style because, or not style, it's a very different experience because the pitch is higher, but, and you might think, well, the pitch shouldn't matter, but there is a very big difference in experience from like a really low Know actor voice to a very high Know actor voice, but the style is the same, and I think it's really beautiful, personally, but yeah. Thank you for that. Women are really important in terms of the stories of Know, so it's kind of weird that they're excluded, you know, in the tradition.
Isn't all Shakespeare's plays were also played by men?
Yes.
In England?
Yeah. In Shakespeare's situation, or in the situation of England, luckily that changed earlier. But I think it's the big difference is that with the traditional arts actually I don't like the term traditional because I think it's exclusionary. In the classical arts in Japan, they all get to this point where preservation is super important. So they start out as these art forms, and like all art forms, they evolve and develop, and then they hit a point where people are like, no more change, only preservation. And for Know, that was the 17th century. I know Gagaku, which is the imperial court music, also went through the same thing where there was this big change and then they're like, no more changes. Kabuki has done the same thing. All of them have pretty much gotten to this point. Whereas, and so because of that, change becomes really difficult. And even though like nowadays, no, there are no legal prohibitions against women performing Know, but there's still a stigma culturally.
Yeah.
Whereas in the West, this is different.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to try their hand at Know? Or their feet?
My socks are stinky.
Yeah, you are technically supposed to be wearing tabi, but you know, I won't judge. I can at least talk to you about some of the movements. Oh, yes.
So you said that it was connected like to Buddhism.
Yes.
Does Shintoism also like come into play?
Yes.
Is there a more predominant like aspect?
Know is seen as more Buddhist, and when you look at the scripts, there's a lot of Buddhist influence to the point where they literally quote from the sutras. But, especially in the origins of Know, a lot of them do have Shinto origins. A lot of them do have Shinto origins, and like the mask that I showed you of the old man, and I talked about Okina Sarugaku, which is the oldest play, that is a Shinto play. And a lot of the really old performances have these more ritual aspects that are for the gods. And also, the first time that I went to Japan, which was way back in 2018, I went to Fukuoka and I experienced the Hakata Gion Yamakasa Festival, where they race these big floats through the city. And they did a Know performance at one of the big events that was for the gods. So there is still to this day a connection between Know and Shintoism. And there are characters and figures in some of the plays that are Shinto, and there are characters that are dedicated to, or there are plays that are dedicated to the worship of the gods. More generally, there is a huge Buddhist influence. And this, I think, is also partially because Buddhism was a huge influence on the samurai, and the samurai sent their sons to temples for their education, and so Buddhism was their whole life and their whole upbringing. And it's the samurai that really were the big patrons of Know, and so they wanted to see the Buddhism, right? But both exist. I can walk through. So, Know is based on kata, which are these forms, and the point of Know is suggestion rather than representation. So there's kind of an importance placed on the autonomy of the characters themselves. So it's believed that like if you try to embody the character, the audience is no longer watching and experiencing the character, they're experiencing your interpretation as an actor. So the point is to try and hide yourself as much as possible, which is really interesting because then at the same time you get into these conversations about like, well, the actor needs to have their own artistic interpretation of the character. And so the way that they do that is really interesting. Like you'll observe the little tiny differences in the kata that they do. But generally, you want to avoid interpretation and you want to focus on the forms. And the forms are very kind of surreal. So for example, I'll walk through another dance that I did. There is a play, there is a play called Shoujo. Shoujo is one of the Chinese plays, so it takes place in China. There we go. It takes place in China, and the main character is this guy, who is Shoujo. Shoujo is a mythological creature who is red, covered in hair, and loves sake. And drinks sake all the time, but never gets drunk. And I learned a dance from Shoujo, which was very interesting. And so the story goes that there's this guy in China, and he has a dream where his deceased parents appear before him and are like, hey, you should open up a sake store because you'll get a lot of good fortune coming your way if you do that. And he's a good son, so he does that. And this one mysterious customer keeps on showing up and buying a lot of sake. And so one day, he's like, hey, you're a good customer. You seem like a nice guy. I know nothing about you, though. Who are you? And he explains, I am a shoujo, right? And he says, and now that I've revealed myself to you, if you come to the sea at night, I will appear, and we'll have a drinking party, because shoujo lives in the sea. So that night, and it's in autumn, and that night, sorry, I want to say it's in autumn. You can kind of tell because there's a bunch of autumn leaves on the costume, but one cool autumn night, the man goes to the sea, and he kind of starts to doze, and at this point, the sea kind of roars, and up comes shoujo, and they have a drinking party, and at the end of it, the man passes out, and shoujo disappears, and when the man comes to, shoujo has left this giant barrel of sake, and the man discovers that no matter how much he sells or drinks, the barrel never depletes. And so it is everlasting fortune. And so when you start this play, or not the play, when you start the dance at the end where it illustrates this, you're basically dancing about drinking and then getting drunk. So it's interesting because Know is considered this very serious art form, and yet there is kata for getting drunk. So you begin, most of these dances that I've shown you, actually all of them that I've shown you, are kiri, which mean that they come at the very end of the play. And they all start with going forward and doing what in the Kongo tradition is called shikake, which is basically pointing, and then hiraki, opening. And that's just a formality, basically. So you do that, and then you kind of turn to the sake barrel, and you go up here, and you scoop the sake, that's a kata, and then you turn over here, and the way it was explained to me is you walk over, and you're like, hey, do you want some? and then you drink, and this is the kata for drinking, and then you're really happy because you're buzzed, and then you come over here, and you basically, oh, I'm brushing myself. You come over here, and you're basically, at this point, just dancing, like, oh, I'm buzzed. And then you're like, hey, do you want some? Oh, I guess you don't want any. And then you kind of walk around, you're very happy, you come over here, you walk around, and at this point, you're starting to really feel it. So you take 5 steps forward, and then you're like, oh, I don't think I can walk anymore. And then you stumble backwards, literally. And then you turn again, and you stumble backwards again. And at this point, you're like, okay, I better have a lie down. And you sleep, and the fan becomes a pillow. So then you sleep. And it's at this point that even though you're dressed as shoujo, you kind of start embodying the character of the waki, who's the other man. And so you're just you're drunk and you've just passed out. So then you wake up and you look over here and you point over here to this column, which is traditionally known in Kongo school at least as the eastern direction, which is prosperous. And so you're pointing here in the east, and in this context, it's to the everlasting jar of sake. And at this point, it kind of just becomes ceremonial, and you're really happy that you've gotten all of this sake, and you're going to have a really successful business, and whoopee, you're so happy, and then it's formal, and then this is signaling the end of the dance, and the dance is over. And when you do this motion at the end, one of my masters, Tatsushige Sensei of the Kongo school, said that his father told him, it's like you're taking something from heaven, something from hell, something from the mortal world, and then you're finishing and closing them in your fan. It's also, another way to think of it is like, you've just done this whole, you've painted this whole picture, you've done this whole world, and now you're scooping everything up, and you're closing it back up. You're putting it away. So that's for the next time.
Question.
Yes?
When you pass out, you do that sitting? You don't lie down. Actually.
You don't actually lie down.
Yeah.
The passing out.
It's a nice trick.
What did I? And I did. Yeah, the passing out is this motion where you kind of turn around and the fan becomes a pillow, and then you just kneel and tilt forward.
So that's a pillow.
So this is you sleeping. Yeah, and this is the pillow.
I see.
And then you wake up.
I wouldn't necessarily recognize that as sleeping.
No.
So do Know fans who go to see Know all the time, they know all of that, right? Or how aware are they that some of the
that means it's all asleep.
these kata?
They would be more familiar with it.
Yeah.
Some of the kata are easy, like, I'm scooping sake.
Right.
I'm drinking sake, right?
I don't know if that
Okay, well, but for someone who's seasoned in Know, it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
So the more you see it and the more you become accustomed to it, the easier it becomes to recognize. And it truly is a whole vocabulary where you can say so much with just your movement. Because remember, while this is happening, I mean, you do have the chorus that's explaining, which does help with you figuring out what the actor is doing, but the actor is not chanting, right? So it's literally them communicating only through body language. So it really is a language.
So I noticed in the other dance too, you did like the sort of pull apart motion.
This?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess what is that attempting to represent?
It's just a formality.
Okay.
For example, waki actors, when they enter the stage and they say their opening monologue where they explain who they are, at the end of the monologue, they do this motion, and then they put their arms down, and that literally just means, I'm done talking now, and that's it. So there's another example of like the connections to Buddhism and whatnot is that there's a lot of motions that don't have any meaning beyond just ritual meaning. And so the I'm done speaking now is really just a ritual practice. there's also some other interesting, like they're in the kiri for Kyotsune. Kyotsune is a warrior, right? I talked a little about it. They do a motion, I did not learn Kyotsune, so I can't dance it, but they do a motion where they take the fan and it becomes a shield, and then they do a motion like this, and it becomes their sword. And then they end up doing like a really, I can't do it, and I don't want to be offensive, but they do like a cool knee action thing with their sword out, like they're in battle, right? But yeah, the fan can represent a lot of different props, and there's a lot of different kata that you do with the fan to represent different things. Yes?
So when you're wearing the mask for dancing, like a happy dance, when you get drunk.
Yeah.
Under your mask, were you smiling or?
No. So you're supposed to always have a neutral expression, right? Of course, when you're wearing the mask, no one can see your face, so it doesn't really matter. Personally, for me, it's more, oh my god, what's the next move? or it's like I'm disassociated, trying to figure out what the next move. There's also not a whole lot of space, because when you wear the mask is not actually big enough to fit around your face. You have to put like little cushions or wads of cloth on to allow it to sit on top of your face, and then you tie it. So there's not a whole lot of allowance for your facial muscles to move. So if you are like, oh hey, I'm doing this now, your mask is gonna like shift. And then people are gonna be like, what are you doing under there? But yeah.
How old is that mask?
This mask is, I think 19th century. So not super old as far as Noh masks go, but definitely a historic relic. Got it on eBay. For an incredibly reasonable price. Noh masks usually go for hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. But if you get one from an unknown mask maker who made decent masks, you can get them for not super expensive. And I'm very grateful because I will be using this in my thesis. So my thesis will end in a performance. So I'm researching this connection between this 20th century opera that's based on this Noh play. And it will end with a performance in December that will incorporate elements of both. And I'm going to be a part of it, and I will be wearing the mask in performance. So you can all look forward to that.
Date, time?
Date, time! It's December 17th at 6 p.m. in Marsh Chapel. And I can say that officially because I got them to respond to me and I have the date now. So, yeah. If you asked when the dress rehearsal was, I would not be able to tell you. But that is when the performance is. God willing, it will happen. Yeah. Yes?
So, will you have the chorus there with you? /
Excellent question!
Who practice that in Boston?
So, there's not really anyone who practices in Boston. I plan on gathering my own. If anyone is interested, you are welcome to join us. It will be 3 chants, not super long, and you won't have to memorize anything, and I will spoon feed it to you. And then in the performance, you won't have to, like, so traditionally, they sit in what is called seiza, where they're just on their knees, and after a while, your legs get, you know, they fall asleep. And there's actually, sorry, I'm totally getting sidetracked. There's a really funny movie called Ososhiki, The Funeral, by Itami Juzo, a wonderful director. And it's this kind of dark comedy about a family whose patriarch passes away, and they have to make a traditional funeral, but the daughter of the man who is in charge of all of this and her husband are like commercial actors in Tokyo, and they don't have a lot of strong connections to the traditional culture, so they have no idea what they're doing. And there's a scene where they're having a ceremony and they're all sitting in seiza, and the phone rings and someone's like, oh, I'll go get it, and he tries to stand up and then he falls over. But it's true, like when you sit in seiza for so long, it can really hurt. And when I was over there, they made us do it, but they were also like very, very like apologetic, and they were like, okay, you can relax now, like you don't have to sit anymore like that. They would always give us breaks, and they were like, don't strain yourself. Yeah.
Isn't the point of it that your legs go numb, that it's hard to get up after?
I'm not sure if that's the point, but it's
I've seen some stuff and I don't know how accurate it is, that it was like during the Tokyo Valley show that they would have people sit like that so that it's harder to get up and, you know, go and stab somebody.
Well, I mean, it might be a form of torture. I mean, I would think it's a form of torture, but it's more just like, from Buddhism, the meditative practice, and like it's discipline and training yourself, you know. One of the samurai were masochists, I mean, I don't know, but yeah. So we have a little bit more time. Oh, wow, that clock just shot forward. So I can answer more questions. We can end here. I can do another dance. I can do another dance, okay? So this is a dance that is very different. And actually I'm going to ask for your help in pressing play. Because it just kind of goes. So, yeah, okay, go back, okay. It's that one right there. And I think if you just click on it, it'll start. But it starts like immediately, so you get set up here. So, oh, I've used this fan a lot. I'll use this fan. So many fans. The fans are different based on the school. So I learned this in Kongo school, so I am using a Kongo school fan. The difference is, you can tell, they're pretty much the same shape, but you can tell the wood on the Kanzei school fan is a carving, and also the bottom is more plump than the Kongo school fan, which is just a straight bit of bamboo. And also the Kanzei school, this is a typical Kanzei school fan. Their symbol is the wave, so their fans have waves on them. Their other symbol is the bird, specifically the sparrow, I think. You can't really see it on this, but there are birds up here as well. I don't know if I tilt it, maybe it'll catch the light. But Kongo school, their symbol is the clouds. So they have a cloud motif. Also for Kongo school, they have an orientation for the fan. So like this side of the Kanzei school fan and this side look identical. But for Kongo school, one side has two stripes and one has a blob. So the blob is the bottom side. So when you hold it in what is called, or what is translated as yin-yang position, you hold it with the blob facing down and the two stripes facing up. And you have to do that. But then there's also like this Kongo school fan that doesn't have that. So for this fan, it doesn't really matter. Yes. So this is a dance that I learned but did not perform. It is the kusei, so a middle section dance, from a play called Yuya. So this is a very different dance because Yuya is a courtesan who serves a powerful Taira lord. I don't know. Nimori? I can't remember. One of the Taira lords. I didn't perform this dance, so I don't have to know this. But so Yuya gets a letter from her mother, and her mother is saying that she's very ill and she's on the brink of death, and she wants to see Yuya before she passes on. And Yuya asks the Lord for permission. But the Lord says, no, I have arranged for a cherry blossom viewing party at Kiyomizu Temple, and you have to dance, so you're not going to go. And so he forces her to go to this dance, or go to this celebration of the Hanami, and forces her to dance, and this is the dance that she does. And in the play, it's so beautiful that the Lord is so moved by her plight and lets her go to her mother. So it's like a bittersweet ending, because her mother's dying, but at least she gets to go see her. I don't know if my performance is going to be very beautiful, but I guess I'll just do it and then explain some of the kata afterwards. Okay. So when I kneel, you can just. That is a Kazura Mono, which is a third category women piece. And there are some really beautiful parts of the kata. For example, it begins with the ceremonial shikake, hiraki, pointing and opening. But when she's pointing, she's looking at the beautiful cherry blossoms that look like clouds from the platform at Kiyomizu Temple. And so she's that. And the other thing that I want to point out that's really beautiful is she comes over here. Oh yes, so she did this. And then she points over here and twists, and it's supposed to be slower than that, twists, looking over the audience, and that is referencing way back in the day from Kiyomizu, from the platform at Kiyomizu Temple. You used to be able to see the skyline all the way to Fushimi Inari Taisha, the really big shrine with all of the torii gates. You used to be able to see the mountain from there. Now, it's a lot of buildings and, you know, the metropolis, but the text talks about the beautiful scenery and the green mountains of Inari that she views with this great, profound pain in her heart because of her mother. So, I was very torn between performing that and the drunk dance, and I ended up doing the drunk dance, but I kind of wish I did that because it's so beautiful. I think we're at time, so thank you so much for coming. Hope you enjoyed. Look forward to my thesis performance in December. And if you have any questions or anything, feel free to stick around, or I can share my email or anything. I'm always happy to talk about it.